Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Selena from Wholeness Campaign, and today I'm going to share an answer to a question actually I've gotten a couple times recently of whether or not I've been in a place in my life with my chronic symptoms where I've really been debilitated. If I've ever been bedbound or housebound and what that looked like for me in my health journey, how I got out of it. I've recovered from quite a few different things, but in today's video we're going to hone in on my concussion, my post-concussive syndrome recovery journey. After several different concussions, I want to take you through all of them and explain a little bit of the gut-brain connection that I ended up learning about, and also how you could go about healing your brain if you're struggling with neurological rehab of any sort using food as medicine, because this is really what I found to be the most powerful tool alongside, yes, some functional neurology, but we'll get into that. All right. So let's jump in. Okay, so the question about whether I've been debilitated or not has come up a couple times, as well as people accusing me of never actually having been chronically ill, whatever that means. I think that label is a little bit interesting nowadays, but I want to share a few of my stories with my 3 concussions. The ones that I knew about, I was a gymnast and I was hitting my head all the time growing up, so very likely this was a compounded effect. I wouldn't say 3 head injuries can give you what I got, but with my history of being a gymnast and getting my head hit a lot on all sorts of different things, I wasn't the strongest gymnast. I definitely had a number of probably other head injuries in my life that culminated in being much more sensitive to it, even though I didn't quite realize that at the time. So I've got some notes here. If you see me glancing, that's what I'm doing. I'm basically going to share from my notes because I want to make sure that I'm giving all the details. It's kind of a long story. But I'm also going to share my faith and spiritual journey that accompanied these things, because I really can't talk about these things without sharing about my relationship with God. It really is kind of the backbone of my entire healing story. Okay, so first concussion. I traveled to New Zealand just fresh out of high school, actually graduated early, went to a program based out of the North Island in New Zealand, which was an amazing experience. I did some surfing when I was there, not a surfer whatsoever. I definitely was way out of my element. And when I did that, I got what I would say it was the first pretty mild, but definitely noticeable concussion. And I hit myself with a surfboard 3 or 4 times. I can't remember at this point, but I got hit here on my nose. I remember that one because my nose like blew up really big. So I got my nose, my forehead, and then the side of my head. Definitely once I was either hit by bodies or a surfboard. I think 2 times it was a surfboard, and then another time it was a body. So I was chucked around, and I remember just getting a migraine for around 24 to 48 hours. After that, the effects sort of went away. I was living in a community that was very much off technology in the middle of nowhere. And so recovering from something like this would have been very easy. I was not on screens all day long. I was not under blue light. I was showing up to sessions. And so I didn't really notice anything very dramatic about this, except that I definitely had migraine for the next day to 2 days. And a little bit like touchy. Things were kind of sensitive. I was definitely bruised, but I would have considered it just like a mild concussion, like what people would call it, and generally speaking, a mild concussion, which there's definitely variation when it comes to the word mild in this world. Now, the second concussion came after I'd come back from New Zealand. I ended up going to college, and when I was in college, I spent a summer back at home. We went to a trampoline park. I mentioned that I was a gymnast, so I felt like I was the type of gymnast that I was maybe 3 years before, because I was competitive throughout high school, but I definitely was not, and I was not at the level that I was at, but I was acting like it. So I did a double front tuck into the pit, which would have been pretty easy for me a couple years prior. But at this trampoline park, I was doing this double front tuck into a foam pit. So I figured I'd be fine. Honestly, very confused even to this day of why I wasn't fine. But I landed on my head. Not super crazy. That's what foam pits are for. I did get some whiplash, and so immediately I felt like my neck had gotten like very tweaked, and I was like obviously injured. Like I couldn't really move my neck. Eventually, after a few days, that subsided, and then what I experienced was what they call this delayed post-concussive syndrome, and it was almost exactly a week to a week and a half later where I started experiencing the symptoms. Now, at that point, I had flown back to college, and I was at a leadership camp sort of thing where I was, again, in nature, not around a ton of technology, so theoretically could have been a really nice environment to heal, besides the fact that I, traveled on my own, was carrying tons of baggage all the way there and still kind of recovering. But what happened was I just got exhausted, and this was an interesting element of the concussion is it really was delayed, and people think that it's a crazy idea idea for this to happen, but it was almost 2 weeks before I started feeling these real concussion symptoms. And it started with fatigue. So I basically couldn't get out of bed for almost 16 to 17, sometimes 20 hours in a day. Everybody was so confused. I was confused. I was like, what is happening to me? I'm exhausted. I literally can't get out of bed. I'm so tired. And that, if you know anything about concussions, is like a really early symptom of a pretty mild concussion. And usually if you just rest, you will be fine and you'll be good. And so I assumed that, okay, this is probably from that injury. I'm going to just rest. I learned a little bit about concussions. Okay, this is probably some mild post-concussive syndrome. And I kind of just kept on doing what I was doing. I was sleeping an incessant amount, had to start kind of getting accommodations. And by the time I got back to school, I was sleeping. I was super fatigued. I had headaches and I was really dizzy. That was another thing. Like my vestibular system was super off. People were telling me to stay in a dark room. They were telling me to stay laying in bed, not to be under blue light, not to be on screens, which was, some of that is very true and very helpful. And then other parts of that advice is actually not super helpful. Once you've had the concussion for a period of time, that advice actually starts to not apply anymore because you end up kind of creating an environment where your brain doesn't get challenged, and then the symptoms can actually get worse when they're provoked. So if I get under lots of light, I had tons of light sensitivity, which I learned later is because the part in your brain that controls dilation of the pupils in the presence of light isn't functioning properly, and so your pupils don't dilate when they are encountering light, and so you're basically getting full spectrum light on your eyes that are not dilated, and you end up experiencing all those types of symptoms you would with that, which is often headaches, overstimulation. I mean, it can cause anything from brain fog, mental fatigue, memory issues, which was things that I was struggling with. This concussion actually in particular, I remember my memory being quite disrupted. Now the next one was even worse, but it was just like my short-term memory was not there at all. And I got to the place with the dizziness and just feeling nauseous and fatigued that I figured I needed to go to the hospital and check and see if something was wrong. Now that I know more, I probably wouldn't have done that because it turns out there's really nothing they can do for you besides prescribe painkillers, which actually doesn't help the problem at all. And they did do a CT scan. They did inject me with all of that contrast that I know now is quite toxic for the body and contains lots of heavy metals. So that's nice. Pro tip, don't get that if you don't need to. It's interesting. At the time, I totally felt like this doesn't make sense to do because I'm not in an obvious traumatic state of brain injury. And they were basically checking for potential blood clots in the brain. But honestly, you would know if that was the case. My case was definitely not that. It was just a classic case of post-concussive syndrome, but this was very prolonged. So now we're going on maybe 2 to 3 months and I haven't shown any improvement, mostly just regression. And I've gotten very dizzy. My vestibular system was very off. Like I was bunking on the top bunk and I had to really hold on. Otherwise I would sometimes just tip back. I was totally bedbound for a period of time because I really couldn't be around any amount of light. It would trigger migraines. I was trying to listen to all my books, all the schooling that I was trying to do. I was trying to get accommodations for it to all be handwritten and with audiobooks, which is a disaster in case you're curious. Don't ever try to do that. But I was exempt from everything. I really couldn't be in public places. The lights were too much. My brain was constantly overstimulated. Lots of headaches. I mean, pretty much an all-day headache as I would just be sitting in bed nursing a headache. And most of the doctors were telling me just to calm down, just to relax, just to calm your brain and meditate. And I was just thinking, this is ridiculous. It's not doing anything. So I got back from the hospital and actually they told me that I was the healthiest patient they've ever seen and they put me on some aspirin. So, I mean, I was very healthy. That was nice, but I was also quite depressed hearing the idea that everything looked fine. They had no answers for me. I mean, I knew that that was pretty typical of the medical system, but now I really knew, like, I'm really stuck in this. It's been months now and I kind of came here looking for answers and there's nothing to be found. This was a very physical related injury. So in my head, I thought more chronic issues like autoimmunity, that stuff has some nuance to it, right? Like that, I actually think that stuff can be healed with nutrition and we do all these other things. But at the time, I didn't understand how food could really make such an impact on the brain recovery. I thought, if there's damage done, there's damage done. So basically what I felt was the most powerful thing I could do was just to be praying. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed for healing. This is going to sound a little nutty to some of you, but I felt like I heard God tell me to drop out of school, which probably any normal person in their right mind tell me to not drop out of school because I was not doing well, even with all the accommodations. But it was really specific. It felt like he told me to drop out, to apply for this overseas program. and then to go home and rest. And it was interesting at the time, I felt so much joy and life on this, even though my body was physically struggling. I just knew there was something on the other side of it. And I did feel like part of that word from him was that I would be healed when I went home, and that before I went on this trip, which was just a few months after, that I was going to be completely better and I was going to be 100%. And this is kind of wild if you think about this, because now it's been 3, almost 4 months of chronic symptoms that are just getting worse. And so I quit. I actually quit right before a deadline. I was able to get some money back, went home, flew home, and I just rested. I mean, I rested my brain like no other. I really was resting a lot when I was at school too, but I rested absolutely no brain activity whatsoever. So literally nothing. Like, I was not sending texts. I was not on social media. I was lying down, resting in bed. I was listening to audiobooks. That's maybe the only thing I would do, but I couldn't even use my brain too much without getting a headache. Like, I could be in a dark room and no lights, no stimuli, nothing like actively stimulating my nervous system. But if I had even music on, too complicated music, my brain could not handle any amount of stimulation. It was pretty wild. But within about a couple weeks, my family thought it was nuts, but within 2 to 3 weeks of being home and resting, and whether it was the rest or whether it was God, it's up to you, to whatever you want to believe, but I really felt like it was a miracle. I felt like I had been doing some of those things before, and it wasn't until I came home and was operating in this level of obedience, operating in this level of rest, that I was able to really heal. And I'm not joking, like within a couple weeks, I was feeling miles better. Like, I was getting up out of bed and able to walk downstairs and make myself a meal. It was incredible, like incredible. It felt very miraculous. And so several weeks later, when I went to actually go to this program, I was 100%. I was ready to go. I was ready to travel. I loved traveling. And it was a mission school that was based in Mozambique. But in this case, this was the first one where it was going to be a traveling school. It was called Harvest School of Missions. And I went to Israel, the Netherlands, Germany, and Madagascar. I spent a lot of time there. And it was amazing, you guys. I learned so much. I got so deep and rooted in God. And I felt so alive, honestly, for some of the first time in my entire life. It was an amazing, amazing trip. Totally changed the way that I relate to God, think about my future, think about life. It was amazing. And more than that, I was just shocked that the recovery happened so fast. It felt really miraculous, and honestly felt like I was supposed to be on that trip, and that this I don't believe that God ever causes destructive things to happen, but I do believe that he uses it all. And so it felt like he really used this terrible thing that was happening to me to bring me to a place that I really felt like very alive and very whole and hopeful about life. Okay, so now incident number 3 happened around my 3rd year in college. I want to say it was the summer of my 3rd year. And this was an interesting one. I was living in DC for an internship, and I went on a vacation with my family. This was kind of a last minute vacation that I decided to go on. They were hosting it. I went, and a bunch of my cousins and siblings were there as well. We ended up going on a banana boat. If you don't know what a banana boat is, I'll post a picture of it here, or the type of boat that I'm thinking of here. There's multiple different types of banana boats. Some of them are very hard. This one was a blow-up inflatable banana boat that was being pulled by a speedboat. So it was basically like a big floaty that lots of people could fit on. It was like 10 people could fit on this float. So me and all my cousins weighed up this float. We basically went on the ocean with it, and they would take us over the waves, and it was like, it would knock people off, and it was inflatable. Yes, it was inflatable, but it was going very fast, right? So we're trying to go as absolutely fast as possible. Now, part of the way this thing functioned is it would go back and forth across the shore of the resort that we were at. It'd go back and it would go forth, and when it would turn, they typically were trying to like go really fast because it would be really hard to hold on to, and then a lot of people would fall off, and that's often very fun. Not in my case, but it was typically very fun. So just before that happened, I actually switched places, got up right up in the front row, or first or second row, with one of my cousins who was terrified because it started getting actually kind of scary. There were so many bodies and we're being thrown around so violently. Like, they were trying to make it hard for us. And we were all mostly adults at the time, so it wasn't something to be scared of. My cousin wasn't an adult. I switched spots with him because he was nervous, so I don't know who would have gotten knocked if I hadn't done that. Basically what happened is, as it was rounding the curve, I got like launched off of the banana boat, and you get launched pretty high up with tubes like this being pulled by a speedboat. So I got launched, and I wasn't nervous at that point because people were getting launched. But because it was in the middle of a turn, the back end of the boat basically knocked me. So I landed in the water, and then as they're turning around, the back end of the boat clocked me in the head. I think it was this way, but it clocked me in the head some way. And I was actually under the boat for a second. I remember like trying to get up, and it was like I was in a life vest, but it had knocked me over. I was under the boat, and then it like went back up pretty fast. This all happened really fast, but I got a lot of force, like the force of all these bodies going into my head. And immediately I knew I was like very injured. I knew, because I've had the concussion before, that I definitely got some pretty bad whiplash. Immediately the guy starts yelling, "Oh, I didn't hit her." I think he was just scared, but he totally did hit me. And like people were thinking that I just got hit by a body. I did not get hit by a body. I definitely got hit by the boat. And they thought I was like being funny by the way I was acting. So I was like screaming out for help because now they're pretty far away. It was just a total nightmare. It's like your worst nightmare, right? Like I'm like trying to yell for help. They're pretty far at this point. They think I'm laughing. I'm not laughing. I'm crying. And eventually I got someone's attention and I was like, help, like I can't move my body. Thank God I was in a life vest because I literally couldn't move my body to swim. My whole neck and back felt like completely numb. And once my sister came back, she picked me up, got me onto the boat. I mean, I was like shaking and basically was emergency lifted off the beach, you guys. It was not a fun time. I made it all the way to the hospital. And at that point, I'm almost like loopy. I'm a little dopey in the way I'm acting. I'm almost acting like a little drunk. They knew this was potentially like another big injury to the head, which is not good. These accumulate and they can get worse and worse once you've had damage to the brain. And again, at the hospital, they did a CAT scan and nothing major had happened. They called it a mild concussion. And the thing is that the mild term basically gets thrown around because it might have been mild or it might have been mild for somebody. But for me, having had a history now of head injuries, it wasn't mild for me. And it totally depends on how many times you've been hit in the head badly without, I would say, proper nutritional recovery before you can really gauge something as mild. This is in the realm of like not traumatic brain injuries that leave you incapacitated, but in the realm of concussions. They pretty much saw nothing wrong on their scans. And honestly, their tech is really not built for this. I went home, I went back to school, and I spent almost the next 2.5 years struggling with chronic migraines, dizziness, unable to focus. Don't ask me how I stayed in school. I barely made it through. It felt like very minimal capacity to do pretty much anything that required brain energy. I mean, I found myself, if I'd be thinking too hard about a math problem, I would get a headache, so dizzy that I couldn't drive. And then these subtle gut issues, I wouldn't even call them subtle. It was pretty chronic IBS, but at the time I would have called them subtle because I just didn't think anything of them. And I definitely was somebody who was like in la la land about symptoms for many years, which I don't even actually know if that's a bad thing, but I was definitely in a sort of denial, we'll say. So those mild gut issues definitely got worse. When you injure your brain, you injure your gut. There's actually a lot of research now that concussions can actually cause leaky gut because of the stress that's done on the brain, and certain parts of the brain can actually cause a certain level of damage within the epithelial cells. So nobody thinks to look at that as a root cause if somebody's ever had brain injuries as being potentially like a reason why someone would have leaky gut. But either way, I actually think that the protocol isn't any different. So this for me was a huge sort of death to self process. And if you understand that terminology, you'll get it. It wasn't in a negative way. It was in a really positive way. I actually felt like what started to happen to me was that this perfectionism that I grew up with, that I had sort of embedded in my nervous system, started to kind of wear away because I couldn't do school perfectly. I couldn't show up in relationships perfectly. I couldn't even think the way that I wanted to think or show up as the type of capable, competent person that I remembered myself to be. I was very, very disabled, for lack of a better term. Like I wasn't myself. It put all of this emotional coping that I had had probably for years in all throughout my childhood all the way to the test. And honestly, it started kind of withering away in the most excruciating way possible. This is where these 2.5 years were some of the deepest time of inner healing, as much as it wasn't the most amazing recovery. And I look back and I'm like, I totally could have supported my body differently. There was a lot of deep underlying things that were going on during these 2.5 years. And I really actually think this is where the healing became so much more than physical. It was a deeply emotional process. So for me, the nervous system regulation, however you want to talk about it, emotional healing came very correlated to how I was physically feeling. And in part, that was because I actually started eventually opening my mind up to the idea that healing could be possible only with the renewed mind that I was given in the emotional healing process. But what I found to be one of the biggest things I took away from that was that I definitely was living in denial about things, not just emotional, but physical. Like I said, there were gut issues that were going on for years that I just totally ignored. And there were emotional things that were a problem for so long that I totally ignored and totally suppressed myself emotionally. But what's interesting about denial is that your body actually will never deny itself. Pain will always force itself to come up in one way or another. So if you're rejecting yourself in an emotional way, it will pop up in a physical way. And if you're denying your own physical pain, it manifests emotionally. And I saw this sort of crossroads where I kind of got to this place of realizing I couldn't live in denial anymore. I couldn't deny my symptoms. Even with some of the concussion stuff, I was operating as if I didn't have problems, and then I would just pay for it later, or I would try to pretend like I was okay in some settings and then go home and totally crash out and not be able to function for hours or days on end for that. Like, it was a really deep thing that was happening. So I went on a huge emotional health journey. There was a lot of reparenting that I was doing to my inner child. There was a lot of renewing of the mind that I was doing. I went through a lot of deliverance. If that resonates with anybody, it might. It's basically a somatic release. We'll just talk about it like that. A deep somatic release. And really ultimately dealing with my core beliefs that have been there my whole life, and not just suppressing them, but letting them express themselves in ways that felt authentic to me. And for me personally, as somebody who believes in God and has faith in God, it actually wasn't just saying, oh, like, if I don't feel good enough, it must just be that I need to tell myself that I am good enough more. I actually think that's a form of religious suppressing of emotions. But actually what I found was even better than that was just owning it, just owning the core belief as true even, and not in a self-deprecating way, but in a way that I could actually look to Jesus as the one who was good enough on my behalf, that I didn't have to be striving and perfect all the time, and that I could actually just rest and receive and heal and recover. And it was just this really big, deep healing work that ended up happening. I think it needed to happen. I don't think it needed to happen in that way, but it woke me up. And honestly, I was the most debilitated after my last concussion, but this was my deepest time of inner healing and really self-discovery, which I think has to be everybody's chronic symptom recovery journey, that there has to be a new identity, almost like a rebirth in a different way, in a weird way. If you're really going to go on the journey of then saying, I'm going to take full ownership over my health and I'm going to prioritize myself, I'm going to love myself, because I think at the core of it, it's really actually a question of like, am I going to love myself and accept myself? Am I going to try to outperform people in religion? Am I going to try to perform socially? Am I going to try to perform physically? Am I going to try to constantly be in the state of achieving more and more? And you guys, trust me, I'm like still an achiever, but is that going to be like where my identity is? Or am I going to be just a daughter and be able to be loved and accepted and chosen no matter what? Some of you will resonate with that and some of you won't. That's okay. But that's been my journey of, I think, what I would describe as wholeness. We call it the wholeness journey in my community, because it's not just physical, but it definitely translates to the physical. So at that point, I had tried homeopathy. My gut was so out of whack. I couldn't tolerate anything. I had changed my diet to help with fatigue, but I didn't do much because I didn't really know enough. I did very minimal things, like including more whole foods and less processed foods, less grains, but it really wasn't doing very much because I didn't know the things that I needed to be including to really see the healing. Now, about 2 years in, I was praying and I was at the place now where I'm ready. Okay, God, I really want to heal. I know I can't live like this anymore. I was debilitated, and it honestly took that inner healing work to be able to see this side of me that would rise up and start to fight against what was going on and realize that I had some power over it. But I prayed and I was like, God, I need help. And literally that night I got a dream and I saw the name of a clinic in the dream, and I just saw it flash over my eyes. I woke up and I saw the name, and I right away went and Googled the name of this clinic. I had never heard of anything like this before. I'd never done any research in this before. Honestly, should have been doing research, but totally was not. And right away it popped up that there was a neuro rehab clinic in Colorado that does functional concussion rehab. And It was quite expensive, you guys. Very, very expensive. These types of clinics basically do what's called functional neurology. So they use chiropractic care and functional medicine to heal the brain. And often these little exercises that actually help to rewire the way we use our vision and use our brain and our vestibular system. So it was a whole protocol with that. I went to my dad. I was like, Dad, I need you to pay for this program. And he was like, wait just a minute. He went ahead and looked, and he found that there's a clinic almost exactly like that, cheaper, 30 minutes from my house at the time where I was living here in Illinois. This clinic was basically birthed out of helping brain damaged athletes to recover from concussions. So they're really good at it, and they do almost everything that the other clinic did. They actually did it in kind of a shorter period of time. Whether or not that makes a better difference or not, it didn't really matter. I was shocked. Turns out there's almost an identical clinic 30 minutes from my house. So it was crazy. They specialize in chiropractic neurology. So they're certified neurologists and chiropractors. They use both of those together, and it's so helpful. There's only a few of them in the country. At the time, I think there was only like 4 or 5 clinics like that in the country, and it happened to be so close to my house. And now there's probably a little bit more, but still probably under 15 in the country, like not a very popular thing. So I went in, I did lots of neurofeedback, I did lots of functional neurology, and you guys, within like a couple days of working with them, a major amount of the dizziness went away. There was so much that was just tied up in my vestibular system. Like there was still mild dizziness, but it wasn't anywhere near where it was. And they fixed it in this one little manipulation move that they did. I don't even know what it was, you guys. You're going to have to go and look for them. I can't like recommend their stuff because it's so catered to you, but it was wild. I mean, I felt so different after that, even just that one appointment. So there was oxygen therapy, there was vestibular therapy, all sorts of different things. I was training my eyes to dilate again, which is kind of a crazy thing because they weren't dilating right. And you could see in the tests, like after several weeks of doing this, my eyes started dilating again so I could be in light. It was wild. A good majority of the migraines went away. It didn't fully go away until I started doing the nutrition work, but neurofeedback was great. I actually did notice benefits from it, despite the fact that when they did the test before and after, it didn't actually show very much change in my brainwaves activity. I don't even know if neurofeedback really works. I would love to think that it does, but my experience with it is that the testing was kind of wonky. I experienced the benefits, but the testing was really wonky, and I literally don't know if my brain was just so hyperactive / maybe is still hyperactive. I think probably there's always work to be done, but I was in the red all over my head. And I still was in the red by the end of it, which is funny, but I did feel a lot more calm. I felt the difference, even if the brain waves weren't showing up that way on the scan, the EEG scan. Honestly, I kind of feel like meditation and just calming down my lifestyle in general helped me even more than that. I think it can actually do a very similar thing than neurofeedback. Nobody wants me to say that, but it's really, really similar. Neurofeedback is just training your brain waves to calm down. I was experiencing this like upturn of like OCD-like symptoms, just lots of almost panic attacks at times with this concussion. Like I had never been like this before. I don't know how much of that was embedded in my nervous system and was just starting to manifest from all the inner healing. Again, it could have been concussion related or not. But again, I just saw this like powerful, almost miraculous thing where he showed me, he led me to this place, and I got so much relief and so much healing. And I would say I was probably like 70 or 80% of the way there. Now I had myriad of other issues going on in my body, not related to the concussion at all. And I think a lot of those were basically kind of fueling the 20 to 30% that wasn't budging with this neuro rehab. I did the neuro rehab for a couple years actually. So I would do sessions over the span of several months, and then I would take a break. I would do 2 weeks of an intensive. I want to say I did a couple weeks. I spent a lot of money in that place, but it was very, very helpful and very needed for me. And then at that point, I was looking to God again, and I was like, okay, help me heal, help me get better. And there were other issues at the time. My gut was a disaster. I had come back from some of those trips that I mentioned with lots of parasites, more than I probably had going into them. And we were drinking rainwater. I was a disaster. I wasn't digesting food. I was allergic to tons of different things. And even the neurologists were kind of saying some of this brain stuff might not heal until we heal the gut stuff. And they basically told me to go home and drink bone broth and eat liver. And so that was kind of like the tipping point for me. I was like, okay, I'm definitely not going to eat the liver, but I need to do something with my nutrition. And I, again, prayed, and I was like, God, I need help. help me figure out what to do. And it was like a couple of days later that I went to a friend's house and they shared with me about AIP, which is the autoimmune protocol. And the autoimmune protocol is basically for healing autoimmunity, which I was not actually diagnosed with any autoimmune conditions. It was mostly gut related things and neurological issues, although I had asthma. And so that's debatably autoimmune. I don't really know what's considered autoimmune. I feel like that definition is expanding so much. But I learned all about the diet, read about the diet, basically got myself onto the diet, and it was kind of helpful. I didn't like officially start, and that's when I heard about GAPS. So I had incorporated tons of elements. I was doing days where I was doing AIP, and sometimes I would go like a week on AIP, and I hadn't like officially started because there's like a timeline you're supposed to do with AIP. It's like a couple years. And I hadn't officially started that. We were getting married at the time, and I was waiting for him to be on board, and that's when I learned about GAPS. And so I learned about GAPS, and I thought, this actually makes way more sense for me because it treats the gut very differently than AIP treats the gut. It's not just anti-inflammatory, but it's actually healing the microbiome. And knowing that I had been through over 30 different rounds of antibiotics in my whole childhood, I definitely knew that I needed some work on my gut microbiome. And the GAPS really changed everything for me. It was, again, like a big culmination of things that were leading up to it. Lots of provision from God is what I experience it as. And nutrition was really what my body needed. After even just a month or two, I want to say it was like 3 months before the migraines completely went away, but it was just a month in where my digestive system, the chronic digestive IBS sort of stuff, got almost unnoticeable, at least for the time that I was on the early stages. At that point is when I realized that this was going to be a little bit of a longer journey with some of these symptoms, which it was. The transformation was just insane. My body, my brain just needed so much more fat than I was giving it. And as I started to give myself the fat, started to heal and seal leaky gut with meat stocks and fermented foods, it was wild. I was doing everything wrong in the beginning, but I was still seeing such amazing results. I don't know how it happened so quickly for somebody who was doing it as wrong as I was. Trust me, it was like really, really bad actually. Like I was not doing it very well. I didn't know a thing about making meat stock, which if you're interested in making meat stock, I have a mini course linked below for $17. I teach you everything that I should have known in the beginning. But I was literally just throwing in a whole like package of ground beef into like 2 gallons of water and drinking the liquid. It was disgusting. And yet it was like healing me. I don't know how that happened, but just the increase of fat, the residual neurological symptoms just went away. It was incredible. It felt miraculous. And again, it just felt like that was what I was needing at the time. I needed something that was going to get to the root cause. And then when I started detoxing, that's like a whole other story. That's when I started seeing the dietary changes actually stick and last. And so I could be off of the protocol and not have any flare-ups. It was really, really amazing. And that's really shaped a lot of the way I see God. It's shaped a lot of the way I see us taking control and being in power over our health. That's why I'm always challenging you guys to take control and be in charge of yourself, that nobody else is coming to rescue you, obviously, except for partnering with God. I don't believe you're alone in it, but just this idea that you have so much more power and initiative and authority than you think you do, and you have the ability to partner and join this process of healing yourself. You don't have to be this passive victim. You don't have to sit back and wait for a cure and watch other people in your life get better around you. You could actually have that for yourself. And this is actually where I birthed the Whole Health Blueprint, my 6-month coaching program. This is where I birthed all of this out of, this idea that to really heal any chronic symptom, we need to heal the gut, we need to detox the body, and we need to regulate the nervous system. I think they all are such important pillars of healing and getting to the root cause. I actually think they are the root cause. And this doesn't just come from me flippantly saying that. It comes from actually experiencing it. And also then helping other people and realizing that this is how it happens for everybody. They might go about it in different ways. They might prioritize different pieces first. They might try the nutrition first. Some might try the nervous system stuff first. And yet people are all having to do very similar things. We have to get whole with our diet. We have to get toxins out of our body and our environment. And we have to regulate our nervous systems. None of these are negotiable. They all are tenets of happy people and successful and healthy lives. So If you're interested in going on that healing journey, really diving deep, this is not a cheap, quick fix. This is an invitation to a journey that's actually going to take you to the root cause of your chronic symptoms with full ownership and full authority. And I'm there to give you all the tools. I have that 6-month whole health blueprint coaching program that is designed to do that. It's designed to take you start to finish with ample support. We've got lots of group coaching in there and individual one-to-one coaching to give you everything you need with this 6 course modules, 5 supplemental courses, plus many, many, many resources there to help you at your fingertips. So if you're interested in that, the application for that is below. We would love to have you. If you want to hop on a quick call with me after you've applied, you'll get the link to do so, and we can chat about your specific situation for 15 to 30 minutes, see if you have any questions. But that's really where I've designed this program, and I would love to join you and partner with you in your healing. Okay, if you got any value out of this video, like the video, subscribe to my channel for more root cause, gut health related content like this. Comment below your healing story, whether you had to start with the nervous system, the food, the detox. Let me know where you started and what led you to each, because I'm so curious and I would love to hear. I know everybody's journey is different, but I think it's cool that people often end up revolving around very similar topics. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.